How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, live today on Monday, September 23rd. Not quite through all of Week 3. We got a couple games on tonight's schedule, 2 Monday night games tonight that I will be previewing on tonight's show, but also going through all the craziness of yesterday's games. I got a bunch of games that I wanted to talk on today's show. I'm going to preview one of the Monday night games to start off, but also we're going to be talking about the Dallas game with the Baltimore Ravens, the Eagles beating the Saints, and also the 49ers falling to the Los Angeles Rams as well. All of that stuff, the discussions around it, will be coming up on today's show. But before we dive into all of that stuff, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions during the show, we want to hear about it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insight. So whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or an opinion you just have to share, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. And now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the new Super Chat feature available to you guys. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as conversational as possible. It makes it a lot better. There's a lot of talk now going around these games, so I want to hear what you guys have to say on any topics we bring up, but also anything you just have to say in general. So please make sure to use that Super Chat button whenever you have anything to say regarding anything around the NFL, basically. So that is that now, and we could get right into previewing one of the Monday night games on just in a matter of time, because this one between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Buffalo Bills is set to kick off in less than an hour now at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. The main broadcast should be where this game is played. The main broadcast, but it's a little bit earlier, right? Because the Monday night games are usually at 8:15. The 8:15 kickoff will be later on between the Bengals and the Commanders that I'll also be previewing towards the end of today's show. But the earlier one here, just to get it going, will be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. One of the Monday Night Football games. The Jaguars traveling to Buffalo, trying to look for their first win, and the Buffalo Bills trying to avoid their first loss. The Bills entering 2-0, and the Jaguars obviously at 0-2. Injuries surround both of these teams pretty heavily. Starting off with the Jaguars, a lot of injuries here to get to you guys before we get into the kickoff and more into what will transpire in the game. Their top defensive back was already placed on the IR, Tyson Campbell. Also, Darnell Savage is questionable heading into this game with a quad injury. Tank Bigsby also is questionable with a shoulder, and Evan Ingram, their starting tight end, has been ruled out with a hamstring injury. A lot of big name players there for the Jaguars on the offensive side of the ball, but also on the defensive side of the ball as well. And speaking about their offense, they continue to struggle in last week's loss to Cleveland. In Jacksonville, they lose at home 18-13 with no wide receiver over 3 receptions. Just an ugly, low-scoring game between the Browns and the Jaguars last week. We thought we saw the offensive struggles from the Jaguars in Week 1. I don't think they registered a point in that second half against the Miami Dolphins, which now are looking like, a lot less of a contender now, right, going forward because of the fact that, right, Tua is out now. They have Skylar Thompson in there. I don't think they've ever, they're the only team, I think, from Week 1 to not hold the lead in any of their games. And it is a little bit concerning from that point, because if you look at the Jaguars now, and if you would have just, done a little bit more in the first game to win, you could be in a better situation now where it's not so dire of a situation right now, heading into Buffalo, of all places, to go and try and pick up your first win. You look back on it now in hindsight, right? That's one you really regret having slip away. But now continuing on with this offense, that's not where these struggles end, because the receivers, the passing game is one thing, but also their running game hasn't looked stellar or really it's looked average pretty much because ETN registered 44 yards in week 1 and 52 yards last week against Cleveland without Tank Bigsby in that contest. He did score a touchdown last week, the only touchdown for the Jaguars in that game, but week 1, he had an okay game with Tank Bigsby, but then last week, without him, again, just another so-so game where you would have liked to have seen more, especially in a game where the Browns were just coming off of a bad loss to the Cowboys. You would have liked to have taken advantage of that a little bit more, but obviously now that is what it is. With the injuries to the secondary now, holding the Browns and Miami to 20 points or less isn't bad, but just that, going on from that last point, their offense haven't been able to take advantage of it. And with all that being said, you look at this situation now and how dire of a situation, like I said, it was, but you look at the division and the Texans just lost a game. They are now 2-1. You look at the Tennessee Titans, they're not doing any better. They're now 0-3. They're the only 0-3 team right now. The Colts managed to win a game. They're 1-2. So it's not like, the Texans are 3-0 or the Titans or the Colts are also like 2-1 or something, right? You're still pretty much right at the level of everybody else other than the Texans, right? Everybody else has a losing record. So if you win this one, it would be a massive ask, kind of hinting to my prediction. But, it's not like everything, like the sky is falling at this point so early on. It could definitely be worse. And Trevor Lawrence and definitely just this offense, I think, I would like to see more from them just to at least start the game, right? Because they've held their opponents to a pretty decent score through the first 2 weeks, but that offense has just been pretty disappointing so far through this. So now I would like to see, Trevor be the reason why they win games, and he'll be put up to the test tonight against the Buffalo Bills, who, again, much like the Jaguars, are dealing with a ton of injuries as well. We already know about linebacker Matt Milano already being placed on the IR. He's going to miss most of the season. Their linebacker Terrell Bernard is out with a pectoral strain he suffered last week against the Dolphins. Their defensive back Taron Johnson is also out with a forearm injury, and that is pretty much it from that standpoint, but 3 big losses on the defensive side of the ball. And through all of that, they are still looking like one of the real legitimate teams in the AFC, which is unexpected, but also, you have Josh Allen, you have Joe Brady apparently, who is really, really delved into sticking to this offense and just enhancing it in his second year with the Buffalo Bills. It seems to be the theme of all of these good teams, right? Fantastic play calling and executing their scheme the way that they want it, right? They dictate the pace of how the game's going to go. You look at them, the Minnesota Vikings, who just defeated the Houston Texans, the Saints to a degree. We're going to talk about more about them later on, but those are sort of that seems to be the blueprint right now for these really successful contending teams up to this point, and the Bills follow that right up until the T. And also, not only just their offense, but the defense as well. Gregory Rousseau, Von Miller, Ed Oliver are all getting to the quarterback, just pretty much rushing those 3 or 4 guys. So when you have that, you can put more bodies back there, and it becomes even more difficult to throw it around probably like 7 or 6 guys in the second half of the defense, all just trying to keep everything in front of them. They've got a good recipe going right now. No one's really challenged them yet from that standpoint, and that's where I kind of get into my key factors and matchups to look out for the Jaguars to kind of make this a contest, hopefully, for everybody watching, because the first matchup I wanted to pinpoint was the Jaguars offensive line going up against that Bills front 4, like I said. Last week, Trevor Lawrence got beat up by the Cleveland Browns. He was running for his life back there. Nothing really became fluent on the offensive side of the ball, so how well does this Jaguars offensive line kind of rebound off of that and force the Bills to bring an extra blitzer, bring 6 guys or something like that, and then have favorable matchups on the backside? Also, from the quarterback standpoint, Josh Allen against Trevor Lawrence, not directly, but their performances and how much they influence the game will be huge. Will Josh Allen have to be the Josh Allen from the Cardinals game, or more so like the Josh Allen from the Dolphins game, right? And are we going to see Trevor Lawrence sort of break through this stoppage, this roadblock that he seems to be stuck on, and really get the offense going this season. That's another one. And their Jaguars defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, against Joe Brady. I think that'll be a very fascinating matchup to see how Ryan Nielsen tries to stop that running game, tries to keep Josh Allen within the reaches of his defensive line, which is very good. And if they could affect the game, last time they played the Jaguars, Josh Allen at the time for the Jaguars, now Josh Hines Allen, is, or was, I should say, all over Josh Allen, the quarterback, right? He got to him a bunch of times, and the Jaguars were able to pull out a win. So can they do that again, stop the run, and force guys like Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid and these other guys to really try and win them the game rather than just running it? And some more ideas around this game: which running back also will help negate the other team's pass rush, right? James Cook on one side, Travis Etienne on the other side. Which running back can sort of get their offense going, take away that pass rush, and just force them to play the run, and that way taking off some of the pressure on their quarterbacks? And also, which supporting wide receiving cast can show up and kind of make or put their imprint on the game, basically, right? Because one side you have Keon Coleman, a rookie wide receiver, Khalil Shakir, guys like this, right? Dalton Kincaid from the tight end spot for the Bills. And then on the other side, you have another rookie wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. No Evan Ingram, so that's going to be huge. You have Gabe Davis playing against his old team. Which one of those groups can really get into the ebbs and flow of this game and try and make an impact and help their quarterback out, right? Because I think this game is going to be decided a lot on which offense just looks cleaner, makes the less mistakes, can convert on third downs, all the sort of good stuff, right? And that's why I have more confidence in the Bills up until this point, just because the Jaguars are dealing with too many injuries, especially on defense. I don't like that when the Bills' offense has been so prolific. And then again, also the Bills just seem to have found their groove a lot earlier than the Jaguars as well. And their defense is surprising me. If those guys can get to Trevor and that offensive line struggles again, it's going to be a long night for the Jaguars, unfortunately. Traveling so far to get up to Buffalo, uncomfortable travels, and now potentially an uncomfortable game is the last thing you want. But I feel like the Bills will edge out the Jaguars in this game and beat them. I'm going to say they'll win 24 to 13 tonight. I feel like they'll have another convincing performance and then really get challenged next week against the Baltimore Ravens. So that's only one game of tonight's slate. We have the other game that I will preview later on. But after the break, we're going to talk about one of the bigger headlines from Sunday, the Dallas Cowboys losing again to the Baltimore Ravens, a closer one, 28-25, but still the same issues remain with this Dallas Cowboys defense. We're going to get into all of that, breaking down the game and what happened in it right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Jumping right back into the action now, talking about more of the games from Sunday. We already previewed one of the Monday Night Football games set to kick off in less than an hour, about 45 minutes here Eastern Time. But like I said, we're going to talk about one of the bigger games that transpired yesterday on Sunday between the Cowboys and the Baltimore Ravens. Dallas drops its second consecutive home game to the Baltimore Ravens with a 28-25 loss after their comeback efforts were ruined towards the end by, of course, their run defense not being able to stop Lamar, trying to get that first down. He ended up getting it, and that's pretty much where the game ended. And, there's a lot to say about this game, but I think we have to start with talking about the protagonist of it all, right? Derrick Henry against the Dallas Cowboys. As you see on your screen, monster day for Derrick Henry, right? I think everybody predicted it a little bit, right? 25 carries, 151 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day for Henry. You add on Lamar Jackson's day from the ground, 14 carries, 87 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown as well for Lamar, while also adding 182 passing yards and a touchdown as well through the air as well for Lamar Jackson. And on the other side, the numbers don't speak terribly about, the Cowboys a little bit. Dak was 28 of 51 for nearly 400 yards. He threw for 379 and 2 touchdowns. The lead rusher, I think it was Rico Dowdle, if I'm not mistaken, for this game for the Cowboys. He only rushed for 32 yards, which, again, another game where they become one-dimensional, right? Rico Dowdle, whoever's running the ball for them, just really not a major contributor, which is a worry for me going forward. And then Jake Ferguson, the leading wide receiver, led with 6 receptions and 95 yards ahead of CeeDee Lamb. He didn't have a bad game, but I think for his standards, CeeDee Lamb, you could see the frustration on his face on the field, on the sidelines as well. Definitely not one of the better games for him. And the biggest stat that stands out is this one, right? 607 rushing yards allowed in their last 3 home games for the Dallas Cowboys. This one last week against Alvin Kamara, and their last home game before this season, the playoff game against the Packers, another big game to Aaron Jones, right? Aaron Jones recorded 118 yards through the ground, Alvin Kamara 115 rushing yards through the ground, and Derrick Henry the whopping 151 rushing yards, all on the Dallas Cowboys, who, it's not to say that they lost major defensive line players. They lost a couple, but you still have the majority there. The linebackers are new. Eric Kendricks, Overshown as well, are new. But again, Trayvon Diggs is still there. Malik Hooker's still there. You did move on from Dan Quinn as well, which I guess now in hindsight isn't looking like the best. But I don't think it's really down to just scheme or game planning or even the coach. I think really it is, in all fairness, probably a combination of all of it because of the points I am going to bring up in this segment. But, it does come to a point where, the players are the ones out there playing. You still have, I'm not going to say allegedly, you still have Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, these guys on the defensive side where Eric Kendricks isn't like a washed up, has-been player, right? He played very good in the game against Cleveland, but now that I think teams are starting to see this blueprint, right, where you get ahead of the Cowboys, you kind of punch them in the mouth, and you run all over them. If you could establish some sort of running game, now teams are starting to see that formula where the Cowboys are just unable to punch back or respond in any way. But before we dive into those things, going over what happened in the actual game, Baltimore got off to a fast and aggressive start in this contest like the Saints did last week. They scored touchdowns on 3 of their first 5 drives. The biggest deficit didn't come until the third quarter when the Ravens led 28-6. Dallas, the defenders were missing tackles, not being able to get off blocks was a massive thing, and just bad technique and bad communication for Dallas on the back end, right? Because on the touchdown to Rashad Bateman, I want to say, the defender, I have never played football. I don't want to make it seem like I would have done a better job, but he gets faked out way too easily on that play, and then there's nobody within 10, 15 yards on that play. You have that one. Lamar Jackson, again, a read option gets Micah Parsons to just not move. He stuns him a little bit, trying to decide whether it's Henry or Lamar keeping it. And there's nobody else helping out Micah. As much as it is his responsibility to kind of decipher who has the ball, I found it a little bit surprising that nobody else came even close to even knowing that Lamar had the ball, and then by the time they did, he was pretty much walking into the end zone. So all of those little things were concerning. Obviously, the line of scrimmage also just getting moved back at least 5 yards each time Derrick Henry carried the ball. Then after that deficit, right, 28-6, then the Dallas Cowboys got a little bit of a spark late in that game with Dak sneaking it in for a touchdown late to make it 28-12. They tried a 2-point attempt, but it failed. Then they tried that onside kick in the fourth quarter, that new onside kick, and they actually recovered it, right? Zay Flowers couldn't control it, and the Cowboys recover it. They're the first team with this new rule to recover an onside kick, so I didn't think that was ever going to work, but apparently it does, and now Dallas gets the ball back, and after they recovered that onside kick, after that, they scored another touchdown. They make it 28-18 because they tried the 2-point attempt again, and it didn't work out for them. So now they're down 10 points, right? They forced Baltimore into another bad situation. They punt the ball, and Dallas, again, goes down the field and scores their third touchdown of the game, of the fourth quarter, I should say, actually, to make it 28-25. And now we're thinking, at this point, I'm thinking, I can't believe the Cowboys are this close at this stage of the game, but I'm also in the same boat thinking, like, wow, this is just like the Ravens, right? To just give up another massive fourth quarter lead like this. I'm thinking this game is playing out so perfectly to see what everyone's been saying about both of these teams, right? The Cowboys getting smacked, getting themselves into major deficits and not being able to come back, and the Ravens, on the other hand, being masters of giving up big leads. And we saw both instances in basically each half pretty much. But the Ravens, bunkered down. They got serious. And on the offensive side of the ball, when they got the ball back, leading only by 3 points, they were able to get a couple first downs and pretty much end the game there. But they didn't really have the ball a lot in the fourth quarter or even in the third quarter as well, which is a problem. I will get to that a little bit later. But that's pretty much how it went. The Cowboys almost came back completely, but they did fall to 28-20. They fell 28-25 in this game. Now Baltimore gets its first win at 1-2 now. Same record as the Cowboys, but you feel a lot better now as a Ravens fan than obviously the Cowboys, right? Trending in different directions now. But now we can get into the breakdown, my takeaways from the Dallas game, right? Just very limited to what you can do once they can't stop the run, right? We haven't seen any changes or adjustments, right? And everybody always says that same phrase, that same just statement, right? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and that's fine. That can apply to you. But if you get punched in the mouth and you don't do anything about it, don't try and change anything, then you're really, just like not trying to do anything at all. And that's insane to me, right? Because the Cowboys, the last 2 weeks is, you don't want this to become a habit, right? Obviously, and everyone's talking like this is who the Cowboys are at this point, right? It's starting to become a trend. It is a trend now, 2 weeks in a row. And, I'm just thinking now from this standpoint, right? You get punked, you get embarrassed 1 week, that's all right, I guess, because it's 1 week, right? But maybe you just have one bad game. But then if it happens again, at some point it gets to a point where you're thinking, you guys just got embarrassed last week, so what have you been practicing? What have you been going over all throughout this week to have it happen again, right? That to me is on the coaching a little bit. I don't know if they're tackling or how they're practicing, obviously, but if the same exact thing happens 1 week into the other, that's more so on the coaching as much as it is on the players, right, not being able to execute. But if you're the coaches, something is not connecting there, obviously, for the exact same thing that happened twice in a row. And also, you're preparing to try and stop the run. It seems like this team is unable to stop anything from any opposing offense, right? They could maybe stop the pass if they're able to do what they like doing, which is rush the passer, right? But they're unable to do that because they're not able to stop the run. And then at that point, it just seems like you don't have the people willing or able at all to have the capacity to stop the run at this point in time. And that's, again, like I mentioned last week, the worst place to be in, right? Where you know your issues, you try to address it with the guys in-house, but then you can't, and you really can't get any better through adding people, signing people, or anything like that. That's a scary thought for this Cowboys team. Just being stuck in a place where you're basically that. You're just stuck being who you are right now because you lack the tools and the personnel to go out there and execute. And more so on the game, this Dallas defense just doesn't really attack the line of scrimmage. More so it's the other way around. The offensive line getting their hands on them, and then once they do that, they just can't get off of the blocks. Too many times you see Derrick Henry, just in last night's game, that a lot of secondary players are trying to tackle this 250-pound running back. He just breaks the line too quickly because the offensive line pushes the defensive line further back, and then you got guys weighing like 210, 200, 190 pounds trying to tackle him. It's never going to happen. That's why the tackling looks bad. They can't get off of the blocks. And on the pass rush, right, it gets taken out of the game too easily, right, because everybody says that the Cowboys aren't physically they're not physically tough, right? They don't have the physical toughness to go out there and move other grown men, but I think also mentally they're not tough at all, because once they get into that loss, week after week now, 2 weeks in a row, it seems like the mentality now is very deflating. It's very defeating. You look at CeeDee Lamb on the sidelines, he fumbles a pass where he doesn't get the ball, and he's looking very frustrated, right? You want to see reaction, but it comes to a point also where I think you hear a lot of people mention it, a lot of former players mention it, that you can keep talking and talking and trying to rally teams, but if you're also not playing well, it just becomes noise at that point, right? No one's listening to you, and it just boils over into more frustration, right? Micah Parsons also after the game had things to say, but I don't remember at all in the last 2 weeks where I've mentioned Micah or I've mentioned DeMarcus Lawrence at all in any capacity, right? Making any big plays or making sacks or tackles for a loss. I haven't mentioned any of these guys. It's been all on the opposite side, right, for these offenses. So it's pretty just defeating. Again, you look at the offensive side of the ball for Dallas, and they're throwing the ball 51 times in this game to just come close to the Ravens as well. And that's alarming just because, again, you try to apply your running game, but I think they've given up on it too quickly at times. And from that point on, you just can't continue to rely on Dak to try and get you back in games, because that's not sustainable all throughout a 17-game regular season. And I feel like they were fortunate enough that the Ravens, like I mentioned before, were kind of a team that lets you back into games. They almost came back, which was remarkable, but still, I think it says more about the Ravens being known almost for giving up these leads rather than the Cowboys, actually doing something. If this was a team maybe like the Vikings or maybe even the Eagles or something like that, they're not coming back into this game. There's no way. And that's just how it looks right now because of how limited they are on defense, not being able to stop anyone's run, and also on offense, giving up on the run too easily. They are built to lead in these games, and once they do fall into a deficit, they're not able to change anything, which also, just falls on Mike Zimmer, right? If one thing's not working, I'd like to see the Cowboys try something else, right? In outside zones, if someone's continually trying to run outside zones, try to bring some outside pressure, some outside blitzes from nickels or just outside corners, and make them cut back to your defensive linemen, your linebackers, trying to fill those gaps in as much as possible. There are definitely some risks with doing that, but I think at this point, you can't just keep trying the same thing over again, right? And just keep getting embarrassed in the running game. Next week, they play the Giants, so I'm sure they're going to be favored in that game, but it's just a bad look. The scoreline says it was a close game, but like I said before, the context of how you win or how you lose definitely matters. In this one, although it was a close game, definitely feels more like they lost by 3 or 2 touchdowns, right, rather than only 3 points. But they're 1-2 right now. There's a lot of talk after the game by the players. We're not going to get into that now, but You're starting to see the frustration now from these teams, or from the Cowboys, I should say. And next week, they're on a short week now against the New York Giants. That game's going to be huge because, I think it's right to favor the Cowboys in this instance, right? Just because of the recent history between both teams. But I don't know. Their defense right now, I don't think is in any position to get anybody's overestimated confidence that they're just going to walk in there and shut down the Giants. As bad or as shaky as they might be, I don't think anything would surprise anybody at this point from the Cowboys. So, bad loss. They're trying to shake it off now in a short week, which could be a good or a bad thing. We're just going to have to wait until Thursday. But speaking of losses and wins, obviously, we're going to talk about the Eagles and the Saints. The Eagles walking into New Orleans and defeating the Saints by 3 points as well. More on that game, breaking it down, and how the Eagles got that win after this break. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk about the Eagles and the Saints game. Another big matchup that we had this past week. A lot of good games on Sunday, and this one was definitely one that I try to keep up with as much as possible. One of the biggest games, like I mentioned, Philadelphia ended up getting a 15-12 win over the New Orleans Saints in this one, down in New Orleans, over a Saints offense that has just been killing over the past 2 weeks, and a bit surprising, I think, for some, just based on how everything went. And to me, just to give my thoughts out here before I explain them a little bit more later on, it felt like the Saints kind of gave it away to me in some instances, more so than the Eagles flat out just winning this game, right? And I know, right, that Saquon and Goedert had monster days, right? We're going to look at the stats, right? And I'll actually pull them up for you guys right now. Very, very big days by Goedert and Saquon Barkley, right? Saquon last week, after all that talk about him dropping the pass and whether or not it was a good decision and whatnot, and also Goedert stepping up with Devontae Smith getting hurt and A.J. Brown obviously not playing. Both of them had monster days. Jalen Hurts as well, tacking on 311 yards passing, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and 1 fumble as well. We're going to touch more on him in just a little bit. But Saquon, as you guys see, 17 carries, 147 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Dallas Goedert, the man through the air, 10 receptions, 170 yards, a career day for him. And on the other side, the Saints, not as eye-catching, I guess, from a stats standpoint. Derek Carr, not his best games, obviously. He finished 14 of 25 for 142 yards and 1 touchdown and 1 interception there towards the end to seal it. Then you have also Alvin Kamara, not as dominant of a rushing game, I should say. 26 carries for 87 rushing yards as well. And still, even through all of that, not their best game. They were going to come down back to earth eventually, right? I was predicting it would be against the Eagles, but still, they were still there, and they almost walked away with a close win, if not for a major play by Dallas Goedert on 3rd and 16, right? And that leads into breaking it down a little bit more in this game, right? Because you look at it, and you look at how everything transpired basically in this one, right? You look at the first half, right? A low-scoring first half, only 3 points, but not without some missed chances by both teams, right? From both the Eagles and the Saints. You look at the first instance where Jalen Hurts throws an interception in the red zone, which to me, it's going to look bad on Hurts, but I would more so look at it as a situation where I think Devontae Smith should have cut it in a little bit more, a little bit sharper. It felt a bit too, I guess for lack of better terms, too just straight, almost not enough change of direction on his route. So that's one thing. And then Jalen Hurts, even still, that's a risky throw to make. So I see both faults there by both guys. I wasn't really too upset by that. Of course, you walk away with no points, so that's bad. But later on, Hurts also, after that, fumbles and lost the ball just on the next drive. But the Saints get 0 points off of both of those turnovers by Jalen Hurts. So that's one missed opportunity there by the Eagles in the red zone throwing that interception, but also by the Saints not being able to capitalize on those gifts from the Eagles offense as well, or really from just Jalen Hurts, if you want to really get specific, right? But those were missed opportunities, right? Then you have another missed opportunity, a fake tush push in the first half was just a bad design. You know what that says to me? That says to me that the loss of Jason Kelce isn't as played down as they want it to be. You know, if Jason Kelce's in that game, I don't think they fake it at all. Or if you do want to fake it, you have all 11 guys right there within like 4 yards of each other. If you're going to fake it, fake the handoff or fake like you're going to go forward and then just have someone running vertically past all those guys that are so aggressive trying to stop Jalen Hurts and this offensive line from pushing them back. That's really how I would have liked to have seen it, not Saquon getting a horizontal east and west handoff and obviously getting tackled in that instance. I didn't really like that. In that situation, that was another missed opportunity by the Eagles this time. And Philadelphia also not only missing out on that fourth down play, but also another fourth down opportunity that they missed to start the second half, which resulted again in 0 points from the New Orleans Saints. So that's a fake tush push, another one to start the second half, an interception by Jalen Hurts, and a fumble lost by Jalen Hurts. 4 times the Saints could have at least kicked field goals in 2 of those instances, or all 4, or just 3 of them, and they would have been in a lot better spot in this one. I thought the Saints defense did or overexceeded some of the things that they were expected to in this game, but the offense just didn't match it at the end of the day for the Saints. Then the worst part was, I just mentioned 4 missed opportunities by the Saints, so I didn't even get to the worst one. I forgot I wrote this one down. The worst one was on the block punt by the Saints, right? They get a great special teams play. 2 out of the 3 things for the Saints worked yesterday, but unfortunately they ended up losing because that one failed to, execute when they needed to. There was a block punt by the Saints, great play by them. They are in great field position now, but they decide to go for it on a fourth down, and they don't get it, obviously. Philadelphia escapes again from another situation where if they decide to just kick the 3 points and everything else plays out like it did, you're talking about a 15-15 game, and maybe Derek Carr doesn't feel the need to just chuck up a throw down the middle of the field because there's 50 seconds left and it's second or third down and he needs to move the ball. Maybe he doesn't make that play. Maybe he plays it more conservative and he's fine with going into overtime. But that one I really didn't like. I didn't really like the tush push either, but this one was bad because this one felt like they almost panicked a little bit, like we have to score right now or we have to convert this to really assure ourselves that we're going to win this game. And of course you don't know with talented guys like Saquon or Dallas Goedert, but to me, I felt like they over-panicked in this situation where 3 points, let your defense continue to dominate in this instance. Don't lose the game with another missed opportunity like this, and rather just continue to play at this pace, because up until this point, they were playing very well on the defensive side of the ball, like I said, but again, they missed this opportunity, and right after that, I want to say actually, the Eagles score that massive touchdown by Saquon. They take the lead. Good job by the Saints to come back and score as well by Chris Olave, but then you have a 3rd and 16, and this is usually how sports go, right? You have all the chances in the world to win this game. You have great performances by special teams, your defense, and it's a 3rd and 16, right, where what can go wrong does go wrong. With all your missed chances, the Eagles convert on one. You could say lucky 3rd and 16, and they end up winning the game by 2 massive plays by the 2 guys you see on your screen, and that pretty much seals it. The Eagles steal all the momentum away from the Saints that pretty much had it in the palm of their hand, I'd like to say, but there was too many missed opportunities in this one, like I just rattled off, where the Saints, you talk about 5 or 6 missed opportunities that I said, if they walk away with 9 points, 6 points, and they keep playing like they do with Goedert and Saquon still leading those 2 touchdown drives, we're talking about a different game here, in my opinion. So, obviously hindsight is 2020, but I felt like in those situations it could have been handled a little bit better. And now the Eagles go to 2-1, and so do the Saints. And just some takeaways now. I don't want to put it all on the Saints like they just lost this. The Eagles also did some great stuff. Their defense played very well. Again, Zach Bond is another guy that keeps putting on great displays. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis finally showed up and made an impact in this game up the middle of that defensive line. Jordan Davis got a sack. Jalen Carter was all over the place, involved in everything. And the Saints did suffer some injuries to their center and their guard, Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy, which is huge. But even still, it doesn't take away from the fact that the Eagles defense played a great game. And still off of that, getting back to the point I made before about Jalen Hurts, I'm not going to over criticize Jalen yet because, they're winning games. They're 2-1. So everyone's got things to fix. And obviously Jalen's turnovers and Jalen's decision making could be one of them. But, you're missing A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith was knocked out of the game. And, we're still early on. I'd like to give him a pass here still. It's not like they're 0-3 or 1-2 and he's just costing them the games. He's fortunate that they're talented enough, but it's definitely something that they have to fix. And to me, it should be a case where Jalen should not be throwing the ball like 15 times or 20 times before Saquon gets like 10 or 8 carries, right? It should be the other way around. I would like Saquon to start the games off more, getting the ball like 10, 8 times in the first couple of drives to establish everything, kind of get a feel for what the defense is doing, and that way set up the passing game rather than the other way around, because you run more of a risk of Jalen potentially throwing some turnovers like he did against the Packers or in this one as well. I think going the other way with Saquon getting the ball nice and early, establishing himself, then you get other guys the ball. That way, I think Jalen kind of knows what's going on. It's a lot easier for him, and you downplay the risk, right, in this situation. But still, it's something that they're going to have to work on going forward. Unfortunately for them, Lane Johnson and Darius Slay, I think, went down, both of them with concussions, if I'm not mistaken. So that is something, obviously, two of their best players that they have to keep track of, and hopefully they're not out for too long. And also just the Saints takeaways here to just wrap it up quickly. I talked about the missed opportunities, and also the offense was going to come down at some point, but I would have liked to have seen a bit more fight from them or just some more production. And I think one thing that they do have to sort of address or kind of have a way to counter it is when pressure is applied on Derek Carr, it seems like it is a soft spot because the running game wasn't phenomenal for the first time, and Philadelphia kept sending a lot of people to stop the run, but also a lot of people to get in Derek Carr's face, and it seemed to have flustered him a little bit. The picture didn't seem as clear for him. The play action wasn't really there because they struggled with the running game. So that's one thing that they also have to work on and try and get better off of. But the connection with Olave seemed pretty well. Rashid Shaheed wasn't really a factor in this game, which was one of my fears going into this contest with the Eagles' solid secondary with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay. They took away one of them, but again, still, they were still in this game. I'm still not giving up on the Saints or anything, but I think they would like this game back if they played a bit differently, made some different decisions. I'm sure they could have been walking away from this contest a lot happier if some of those went their way, but it is something they'll learn from. Obviously, funny enough, I feel like these two teams are going to see each other down the line, so hopefully that happens, maybe in Philadelphia this next time, and it could be pretty interesting still going forward. But with that being said, that'll wrap it up for that game, and we have one more game to go over before we preview the other Monday Night Football game here quickly. We're going to talk about the 49ers' epic loss to the Los Angeles Rams. More credit to the Rams for coming back from that, and what does this say about both the loss for the 49ers and also the win for the Rams? We'll address that in just a few seconds when we return.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Thank you for joining me here back on the show to talk about the last game I wanted to talk about here, because I thought it was worth mentioning, because this one was an epic game that I think not a lot of people were aware of, just because of the fact that you're talking about two injured, riddled teams, right? Both teams, the Rams and the 49ers, came into this game with Puka Nacua missing, Cooper Kupp not playing, a couple starters, their center and one of their guards for the Rams not playing. And San Francisco also had Christian McCaffrey out, Deebo Samuel out, and George Kittle ruled out of this game leading up to it with a hamstring injury as well. But even still, going back to my game picks before, I did pick the 49ers to win just because, I felt like Brock was going to have an opportunity here to prove a lot of people wrong, or I feel like Brandon Ayuk would more so get involved in this game more so than he has in the past. But I was wrong. I overestimated, I guess, the 49ers, or actually I underestimated the Rams, because still they have great players, Kyren Williams, Matthew Stafford, and these guys making plays. Their defense stepped up when they needed to, and that's where, some of the plays went. But before that, going over some of these games, I can't talk about this game without mentioning the career game that Juwan Jennings had for the 49ers. Also, even still through the loss, it is worth mentioning, right? Because he finished with 11 receptions, 175 yards, and he scored all three of the touchdowns for the 49ers in this game. Likewise, Brock Purdy also had a very good game, 22 of 30 for 292 yards with 3 touchdowns as well. Showed pretty good mobility, I thought, as well, 41 rushing yards on top of that. And on the other side, Matthew Stafford, like I mentioned, 221 yards through the air with 1 touchdown, and Kyren Williams also taking over, 24 carries, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well for him. Big performances from all the big-name players. Although limited, they all played a very big part in this game, but it came down to the easier, or again, some more missed opportunities, I should say, for the 49ers that really just doomed them here towards the end. But to recap it a little bit more, San Francisco led 21-7 just after halftime for LA to start kind of chipping away at it from that point on. Stafford hit some big plays to Tutu Atwell, to Marcus Robinson, Jordan Whittington also, he stepped up. I'm sure maybe not a lot of people know who that is, but he made some big plays in this game as well. Then you had a 10-point deficit to start the fourth quarter between these two teams. Then the Rams hit another field goal. Hit another field goal to make it 24-17 at that point. And from that point, that's where really all the madness starts to happen, right? Those missed opportunities, like I mentioned, because you got the Rams. They got a big stop on third down for Moody to come into the game with 2 minutes and 47 seconds left after it was 24-17. For a field goal attempt, it was 55 yards. And, just on that attempt, it had the length, but Jake Moody sort of pushed it wide left. And now not only do you miss the opportunity to go up another 3 points, now the Rams have the ball in very good starting position for that drive. And right after that, the drive right after that, the Rams go down the field and tie the game up right after that. And still, the momentum hasn't completely shifted, right? It feels like it has with the Rams answering right away, but the 49ers put together a solid drive, and with over a minute left, Brock Purdy finds wide receiver Ronnie Bell in field goal range if he was able to make the catch, but it hits him like right here, and he drops the ball, and obviously goes to the third down from that point, or they're in worse field goal position and they have to punt the ball. And then from that point on, the Rams go down the field, or actually not, that's my mistake. They have a punt return, like I mentioned, the 49ers punted the ball, and they have a great return off of that, and just makes it a lot easier for them to go down there and kick the game-winning field goal for them to complete the comeback, a 14-point deficit at one point, and win with a last-ditch field goal and take the lead, steal it from the 49ers. 27-24 is ultimately how this game ended up playing, and it just felt like Los Angeles won all of the big moments, right? Their defense was getting cooked by Juwan Jennings. It seemed like every throw that went his way, it was a perfect dart right where it needed to be, or he was mossing guys down the field with some ridiculous catches. He was wide open for a couple of his touchdowns. All of that seemed to be going his way. But still, credit to the Rams defense. Credit to Tre'Davious White for a lot of those plays. He was on the unlucky end of maybe just a better throw or things like that. Credit to him, to this young Rams defense, for sticking to it. And San Francisco's defense on the other side, being the more veteran, experienced team where they were just in the Super Bowl, obviously, last year, I felt like they gave a lot of big plays away. They let the Rams get in behind them a lot, too often, it seems like. And Charvarius Ward played in this game. They had Talanoa Hufanga back, albeit coming back from a long way away from playing football. But still, you look at this situation where the lead receiver for the Rams, I'm pretty sure it was Tutu Atwell, had almost 100 yards. Everybody else had 3 receptions or less, which means, and also the quarterback throws for 221 yards. All of that put together, you'll have 4 receptions for almost 100 yards. Your quarterback still throws for over 220. It means that a lot of these plays were big plays. It's not like somebody had 11 receptions like Juwan Jennings, or 8 receptions. Another guy had 5 or 6. Everybody had maximum 4, and everybody else had 3 or less. So the Rams hit a lot of big plays. Their running game was working, obviously, to allow the defense to get sucked in and for these big plays to happen, which I feel like, yeah, you can give up a couple, but it felt like too often the 49ers were chasing guys behind them, which I wasn't expecting in this game, right? Because their offense was hurt. It's not like they were missing Fred and like Charvarius, because, again, he played in this game. So that one was a bit surprising that he didn't really get too much pressure on Matthew Stafford either, which was another surprising takeaway from this. But I mentioned before, something that was interesting was that Brock had an opportunity now to kind of show everyone that he's not just riding the coattails of all of these talented wide receivers and weapons. And I thought he played very well to display his talent rather than having the ball being thrown to George Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, and all these guys. I thought he did a lot, or very well in this game, to kind of prove that once these guys do come back and Brock plays like this, they're going to be unstoppable like everyone expects them to be. But still, it was just unfortunate moments like the missed field goal, Ronnie Bell dropping a ball that hit him right in the face. All of these things, if they get one of those, they probably end up at least going to overtime or maybe just winning this game outright. So it is unfortunate, but to me, it was a bigger win, it felt like, for the Rams, because if they lose this game, they go to 0-3, and they're not making the playoffs most likely if they go to 0-3 in that division, in that conference. And the trade rumors, start to swirl around a little bit more around Matthew Stafford, if you guys have seen those. So really, if you go to 0-3 and you don't know when Puka's coming back, or really you have an idea when Cooper Kupp's coming back, but you're not really sure, at that point it's very demoralizing. So for them to get the win and get it the way that they did through defense and other guys stepping up, it felt more significant for the Rams than it did a devastating loss for the 49ers, because like I said before, even though it's a tough loss, right, you expect to win this game because of just missed opportunities. You're not 100%. You know that you have at least 50% of your target shares coming back with Kittle, Debo, and Christian McCaffrey, that's at least 50% of your offense, if not more. So, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, you would have loved to have gotten this win, but it's not the end of the world. Yeah, you're 1-2 now after losing to the Vikings. So obviously that's not ideal with the Seahawks winning again. That's another great story. You have the same record as the Rams, which again is more significant for them because now they're not 0-3. Now they're 1-2. The 49ers are 1-2, and the Cardinals are 1-2 as well. So that division's getting tight. I don't think anybody picked the Seattle Seahawks to be leading that division and be the only undefeated team, but it seems to be the theme of this entire season, right? Unpredictable teams, unpredictable quarterbacks, storylines are making or getting the early headlines in this season, and I think this one had a lot of unlikely heroes to kind of go along with that theme. And with that being said, that'll be it talking about that game. That's the last game we'll recap, and we have one more preview to talk about, the 8:15 kickoff of one of the Monday Night Football games that we have on tonight between the Bengals and the Washington Commanders. So we're going to preview that like I did in the first segment. We'll be right back with that to close out the show. Back here now on the show. Thank you guys for joining me for this last segment. And on this segment, we're just going to preview the other Monday Night Football game that we have coming up tonight at 8:15 kickoff on ABC and ESPN+. Not the main broadcast. That one is actually set to kick off in just about 4 minutes or so between the Bills and the Jacksonville Jaguars. But this one, a little bit later, so I saved it for the last segment between the Washington Commanders at 1-1. Traveling to the Cincinnati, or actually the Commanders traveling to the Cincinnati Bengals, who are 0-2, trying to find their first win still in this season. Two former LSU quarterbacks playing in this game, which is very, very entertaining because they're obviously going to be at the center of everything pretty much in this game. So we're going to get into it, looking at the outlook for both of these teams. The Commanders in this one, they have some injuries to try and maneuver around. They have Clelin Ferrell, their defensive end, ruled out with a knee injury tonight. Also, defensive back Emmanuel Forbes was questionable coming into this game with a thumb injury, and those are pretty big. Obviously, the pass rush getting to Joe Burrow, and Emmanuel Forbes, I already wasn't feeling great about this Commanders secondary overall, and if he's also going to be ruled out, not a great sign for them, obviously, going forward, but that is one aspect of it, right? And now the Commanders overall coming off of a win at home against the New York Giants is obviously a great thing, right? But still no touchdowns for this offense, right? They scored 7 field goals in that game and still won. It says more about the Giants than anything, but a win's a win for this Commanders team, so at least they're not still looking for a win so early on in this year. Better game overall, though, I will say that on this offense for the Commanders. The running game with Brian Robinson was solid, 17 carries for 133 yards. Unfortunate that he didn't get a touchdown, but still a solid game. Still concerning on defense because Singletary and Malik Neighbors both had big days, each with a touchdown and 95 yards at least for both of them. So it just emphasizes more of the weak points on this Commanders defense that I worry about in this contest against the Cincinnati Bengals, but I'll explain why in just a few seconds. Then they were just, you look at the Giants in that game, they just had a big game. Actually, I'm sorry, I was looking at this news that just came in from the NFL. Charger safety Derwin James has been suspended 1 game following an illegal tackle against Pat Freiermuth in Week 3. Derwin James won't play in Week 4 against the Chiefs. He's been suspended. Joe also isn't playing in that game. Justin Herbert's health is up in the air. So next week, not a great outlook for the Chargers with 3 of their most important players not playing. So that is that. But still sticking back to this game, it's weird with this Commanders team because just very unlucky for the Giants last week, right? Because Graham Gano got injured, and the Giants in that game missed a point after attempt, right? A PAT, and they had 2-point attempts. 2 of them failed for that game as well. So you're talking about 4 points, 5 points potentially there that could be added onto that, and the Giants win that game as well, and the Commanders are still looking for a win if that all happens. So they were a bit fortunate, right, more so on the defensive side of the ball, that they were able to get away from this unscathed, but that's pretty much the NFL, right? That's how the ebbs and flow of it all goes. Sometimes it is just your day, and like I mentioned when I was reacting to that game, that the Giants score 3 touchdowns in that game and they still lose. It's just how we kind of predicted that game to go, but that is the Commanders side of things, right? Then you look at the Bengals and their outlook after a tough loss just last week and a bad first game. It looked a lot better against the Kansas City Chiefs right after a bad look in Week 1. The Chiefs game was a lot better. There was a lot of controversy in that. We're not going to get into all of that, but T. Higgins is expected to make his debut tonight, coming off of a nagging hamstring injury, which is great news for them. Their offense looked a lot better, honestly, from Week 1 into Week 2, and now if you get T. Higgins back, it's a lot more of a positive outlook for this team, obviously, with him and Jamar Chase being able to play. Also, their defensive tackle, Sheldon Rankings, has been ruled out of this game, which is, a little bit concerning just because Brian Robinson had a decent game and the Bengals running game hasn't been totally something to write home about. So that's a little bit concerning there. Their safety, also Von Bell, is questionable with a back injury. That's another loss that could affect how their defense is looking in terms of efficiency and dominance in this game. Could allow for the Commanders to have some more opportunities. Then also their offense, just more on them. It looked a lot more sophisticated is the word I like to use, because Joe Burrow and how they implemented him, they used different looks, different personnel, motions, and everything like that. It looked more like a high-level offense that even though they might not have Joe Mixon anymore, or they just have Jamar and T. Higgins, and you might not trust guys like Hawkins or Andre Iosivas or Gesicki, scheming them open and having a good game plan a lot of times covers for maybe not having a elite wide receiver or a elite number 2 wide receiver or a star running back. If it all is game planned appropriately and you play to your strengths coming from the offensive coordinator or the head coach, we've seen it with the Vikings, we've seen it with the Steelers of all teams as well, that a lot of that stuff can get covered up if you have game plans like I saw the Bengals have against the Chiefs. So that was a bit more reinforcing to see from them. Still harping on Sheldon Rankings, their run defense remains a concern because of that. If they can get out to a lead, which I believe they are very much capable of, because I'm more worried about the Commanders' overall defense than I am the Bengals' run defense. If they can get out to a lead, then that run defense doesn't really become too much of an issue if they're able to play with the lead. And of course, I couldn't go without mentioning Cam Taylor-Britt. If you guys remember last week, he had some things to say about Xavier Worthy and the Chiefs' offense. Well, now this week, he had more things to say about the Commanders. He said it's a college-level offense, and their offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, and just overall the team keeps it very simple for their rookie quarterback, Jalen Daniels. So again, throwing some more shots out there, trying to call his shot. It worked out pretty well last week. He had that insane interception. Although they lost the game, he played pretty well. So maybe it works out again, but it's always a bit tricky when you're talking about calling your shot like that. But, it is what it is now. He threw out the challenge out there. We'll see if the Commanders answer it. And with that, how and what could affect the outcome of tonight's game is as follows. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins going up against these Washington defensive backs. They just got killed last week by Malik Neighbors. He had a career day against them. And not only do they have to deal against one of them, they have both of them obviously coming back with T. Higgins being implemented back into this offense. How and what do they do to try and give them different looks and not make it so easy for Chase and T. Higgins to be in one-on-one scenarios? Or what do they do to prevent them from taking over, maybe giving up more in the running game? All these sort of things. I'll be interested in seeing how it all plays out. Then we have Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler trying to take advantage of that Cincinnati running game, right? Because I said if they get out to a lead, it won't really matter as much. So the Commanders have to do whatever they can to make it matter, right? How much can Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler make of their touches to have the Bengals come in with more heavy personnel, make it a more favorable matchup outside for a guy like Terry McLaurin, who is still, waiting to kind of have that breakout game with Jalen Daniels. I need to see more of him. How committed to the run are the Washington Commanders in this one, even if they're down a score or 10 points or something like that? That's something I'm interested in seeing. And the pass rush for the Cincinnati Bengals, Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard going up against the Washington Commanders offensive line. These two guys were a menace duo last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Hendrickson getting in there, Sam Hubbard also being a menace. Now going up against a lesser offensive line, how much can they affect the game and get to Jalen Daniels and sort of rattle him a little bit will be huge in this game. Then some of the factors that I'm interested in seeing, how long can Washington's defense hold up with the Cincinnati wide receivers and the passing offense overall? How quickly can this pass rush get to potentially Joe Burrow and help out that pass defense? And also another factor will be, can Jalen Daniels maneuver through the Bengals pass rush now to get the ball to Terry and Diami Brown and guys like this, Luke McCaffrey, some of these players? How can Jalen Daniels sort of survive or maneuver around this pass rush to still be successful in this game? And lastly here we have Washington's run game. How efficient can it be to take time away from Cincinnati, right? I talked about that matchup before. Now, how effective can it be, right? How efficient are they going to be on the ground to limit this Bengals offense? And with all that being said, I feel like it's too many factors for the Commanders, right? If you noticed, I said how long can Washington's defense hold up? Can Jalen Daniels maneuver around this pressure? And can Washington's run game be efficient? All those having to do with the Commanders. I feel like it's too much for the Commanders to overcome. I feel like Cincinnati at home, they get some of their stars back in T. Higgins. They'll win this game. That'll be my prediction. I don't like Washington's pass defense, quite frankly, against Chase is one thing, but with T. Higgins coming back, it's going to be a whole other ballpark, another whole other game plan that no one's really seen yet. So I feel like the Commanders just don't have the personnel to go match up man for man with those guys. So I feel like it could be a long day for them. And also, we saw some growth just overall from Cincinnati, so I believe it'll continue. I believe more so. Hopefully they get that running game going a little bit more. I'm really interested in seeing that. But overall, I feel like they'll win this game. The Commanders will win. With T. Higgins coming back, I feel like they'll win 27-14. I'll give them the win over the Washington Commanders. And that will be the last thing we will touch on today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. The first Monday Night Football game has already kicked off, so go and watch that. Thank you guys for joining me on today's episode. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Check out more of the live show on both YouTube channels to catch more of the live shows, but also YouTube Shorts and individual segment videos as well on more coverage around the NFL. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more headlines, coverage around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me, and I hope to see you guys back here again tomorrow to go over the Monday Night Football games from tonight.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to